He never asked to be her father. He just showed up every single day. And when the judge finally asked her why she wanted to be adopted, her answer silenced even those who never believed in him. Lena didn't talk much, not because she didn't know how, but because the world around her always seemed too loud, too busy deciding who she was supposed to be before she could figure it out for herself. At 9 years old, she was quiet, observant, and carried a constant expression of gentle hesitation, like someone waiting for a question they weren't sure they wanted to answer. Her caramel-toned skin and soft, light brown curls stood out in photos next to her fair-skinned mother, Claire, a woman in her mid-30s whose energy had once filled a room like warm sunlight. But now, most of Claire's smiles seemed practiced, like something she was trying to keep from cracking. They had just moved into a new house in a suburb where fences were white, hedges were trimmed, and eyes often lingered too long on what didn't fit, especially when it came to Andre. Claire had married Andre just 6 months ago. A tall, deep brown-skinned man in his late 30s, Andre carried himself with an ease that came from surviving harder days. His smile was soft, his hands calloused from years at the firehouse, and his voice, a calm baritone, could soothe even the rowdiest engine company. But at school pickups and PTA meetings he drew stares, not loud ones, the kind that whisper with raised brows. Is that her real dad? He doesn't look like them. He's new, right? Andre noticed. He always did. But he never let it touch his tone when he spoke to Lena. "Morning, Peanut," he'd say every Saturday, pancakes already sizzling. Lena would nod politely, curling her fingers around her cereal spoon. She wasn't cold, just unsure. There were no tantrums or slammed doors, only space, and a quiet waiting. What Andre didn't know, what even Claire hadn't seen, was the drawing Lena kept folded in the very back of her backpack. It was a family sketch from a few months ago. Stick figures. Her and Claire were there, holding hands. But next to Claire, there was a blank outline, just an empty shape labeled Dad. No eyes, no smile, just a placeholder. Andre had tried. He fixed. Her bike when the chain slipped. Bought her books about dragons and astronomy when he learned she liked stars. He even helped with her science project, though she barely spoke while they built the solar system together. Claire watched it all quietly, torn between hope and guilt. "She's still adjusting," she'd whisper when Andre looked discouraged. "It's not you." But late at night when the house was still, Lena sometimes crept to the hallway. She'd watch as Andre nodded off on the couch, book resting on his chest, the TV flickering soft light over him. She didn't know what being a dad was supposed to look like. But something about him. Something felt safe. And though she didn't know it yet, that empty face in her drawing was beginning to take shape. Andre never pushed. He believed love wasn't something to be demanded. It was something quietly, consistently given. So he started small. Every Saturday morning without fail, the smell of buttermilk pancakes would fill the house by 8 a.m. He never asked Lena to join him. He simply placed a short stack on a floral plate, drizzled honey the way Claire once said Lena liked it, and left it at the kitchen table, beside a folded napkin and a little sticky note that read, "Just in case. You're hungry." Sometimes it sat untouched. Other mornings the plate would be in the sink by noon, the syrup licked clean. He never mentioned it, never made it a conversation. He noticed the chain on Lena's pink bike was loose, so he fixed it before her next ride to school. When he passed her room and heard the faint hum of the Moana soundtrack, he downloaded the lyrics and learned the songs, quietly humming them to himself while folding laundry or sweeping leaves off the porch. And though she rarely spoke more than a few words to him, he noticed her head tilt slightly when she caught him singing. A corner of her mouth would twitch like it wanted to smile but didn't quite trust itself. But not everyone saw Andre's gentle persistence as noble. Claire's mother came to visit one Sunday. She was polite in that clipped way that always felt like a warning. At dinner, she folded her napkin with practiced elegance and said, "Andre, I'm sure you mean well, but you're not her real father. Be careful not to confuse her." Claire's Fork froze midair. Andre didn't flinch. He simply met her gaze and replied softly, "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to show up." Lena didn't say a word through the meal, but she watched him. She always watched him. Days passed, then weeks, and something subtle shifted. On the fridge, Claire found one of Lena's drawings pinned with a rainbow magnet. It was a crayon family sketch. Claire, Lena, and beside them a tall figure with deep brown skin and a soft blue shirt. A tiny heart floated above his head. Claire didn't say anything, just looked at Andre, eyes glassy, and smiled. Sometimes, when Andre sang around the house, old Stevie Wonder tunes or silly songs he made up while washing dishes, Lena would hum the melody to herself as she colored in the living room. She still wasn't overly affectionate, but she didn't flinch when his hand brushed hers while passing her the TV remote. She didn't hesitate when he offered to tie her shoelaces before school. Her silence, once heavy with uncertainty, began to feel like cautious trust. And then came the night he heard her crying. It was late. The rain had softened into a mist, and the house was still. Andre had gotten up to grab water when he heard the muffled sobs from Lena's room. He knocked gently. Didn't enter, but the crying didn't stop. He opened the door slowly. Moonlight streamed in through the half-drawn curtains, casting silver shadows across the room. Lena's small frame was curled tight beneath the blankets, her stuffed bear tossed to the floor, her breath hitching between cries. Andre didn't speak. He picked up the bear, gently placed it back into her arms, and sat beside her on the edge of the bed. She didn't wake, but her breathing slowed, little by little until it evened out again. He sat there until morning. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the bear. Then Andre, sitting there with his back to the wall, dozing lightly in the early light. She didn't say anything, but when she got up for breakfast, her pancakes were already waiting. That morning, for the first time, she left the plate on the counter, but not empty. A tiny sticky note rested on top, with her small, careful handwriting, "Thanks from me and Bear." The call came just after noon. Andre was halfway through inspecting a hydrant line when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated. Protocol usually meant ignoring calls while on shift, but something in his chest told him to pick up. "Is this Andre, Lena's stepfather?" Shaky voice asked. He straightened. "Yes, is she all right?" "This is Miss Paget, the school nurse. Lena had an episode during the fire drill. She's safe, but she had a panic attack. We couldn't reach her mother. I'll be there in 5. By the time he arrived, boots crunching through the gravel parking lot, his heartbeat was racing faster than it did during any fire call. The school's front office was quiet and stiff with the scent of antiseptic and paper. Behind the desk, a woman with a headset glanced up and stiffened. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for Lena. Lena Turner. I'm her." He stopped himself. "I'm her stepfather, Claire's husband." The woman frowned, checking the screen. "You're not on the authorized pickup list, I'm sorry." "She's in there crying." His voice broke, more urgent than loud. "Please, just let me—" From down the hallway came a small, hoarse voice. "Andre?" They both turned. Lena stood at the edge of the corridor, her eyes red-rimmed and glassy. Her backpack hung limply off one shoulder, her curls frizzed from sweat and anxiety. The moment their eyes met, something cracked open between them. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't leave me." The receptionist froze. Andre didn't wait. He walked straight to her, knelt to her eye level, and opened his arms. She didn't hesitate. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing, into the collar of his firehouse sweatshirt, her tiny hands gripping the fabric like a lifeline. He held her there, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other steady against her spine. "I've got you," he murmured. "You're safe now." The nurse glanced at the receptionist, then gave a silent nod. No one stopped them as he led her out. In the car, she clutched his hand in silence. No questions, no explanations, just the soft hum of the engine and the quiet comfort of knowing she wasn't alone. When Claire got home later, Frazzled and apologetic, Lena simply nodded. It's okay. Andre was there. That evening, the house moved like normal. Claire reheated leftovers, Andre cleared the dishes, and Lena colored at the dining table like any other night. But after her bath, just as Claire was about to tuck her in, Lena paused at her doorway. Wait, she said softly. Can Andre do story time tonight? Claire glanced toward the kitchen where he was rinsing out a mug, then back at Lena. Are you sure? Lena nodded. He reads the voices funny. It was a simple moment, but to Andre it felt like the earth had shifted under his feet. He sat beside her that night, knees awkwardly bent on the small twin bed, a worn copy of Charlotte's Web in his lap. Lena curled up under her polka-dot comforter, her stuffed bear tucked safely beneath her chin. She didn't mention the school, didn't talk about the fire drill, the panic, or the tears, but her eyes stayed locked on him the whole time he read, as if every word he spoke was a lifeline back to solid ground. Halfway through a chapter, her eyelids fluttered. You okay? He whispered. She nodded, barely. I knew you'd come, she murmured, already halfway into sleep. He closed the book and stayed a little longer, the soft sound of her breathing growing steady in the still room. That night, before turning in, he passed the hallway where her backpack lay slouched against the wall. A slip of paper poked out the side. He pulled it gently, another drawing. This time, the crayon family had no question mark. It was Claire, Lena, and Andre. No blank face, no labels, just 3 people holding hands beneath a sky filled with stars. The backyard had never looked so festive. Claire had spent the whole morning stringing pastel balloons along the white fence, arranging trays of cupcakes on pink tablecloths, and setting up a banner that read, Happy 10th, Lena. Laughter floated through the air as children ran across the lawn, their shoes thudding softly against the grass. Lena stood by the snack table, wearing a pale blue dress and her shy half-smile, the one that only appeared when she wasn't quite sure how to feel. Andre hovered near the grill, flipping burgers no one was hungry for. He wasn't much for parties, but he'd carved the watermelon boats himself and made sure the music stayed upbeat, even if no one really seemed to notice. Claire's family had arrived in waves, grandparents, aunts, cousins, all with polite smiles and quiet glances, the kind that lingered on Andre just a little too long. He didn't mind, not today. Today was about Lena. She was radiant, even in her quiet way, giggling at her best friend's joke and twirling a ribbon between her fingers. Every so often, her eyes would drift over to Andre. He'd give her a smile and a little salute with his spatula, and she'd quickly look away, pretending she hadn't been watching. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Group photo time, Claire's mother announced, clapping her hands. Claire began ushering the family toward the patio steps, gesturing for kids to sit in the front. As everyone gathered, someone called out, Hey, where's Andre? Claire glanced over, almost startled. Andre, would you mind taking the picture? There was a pause, just long enough to register the shift in the air, but Andre smiled, that soft, steady smile of his. Of course. He took the phone, stepped back, and lined up the shot. Through the screen, he saw Lena in the center, holding her cupcake surrounded by family. But her eyes weren't on the camera. They were on him. She didn't smile. After the photo, she quietly slipped away to sit under the maple tree near the fence. Andre brought her a slice of cake, placing it gently in front of her. Thanks, she whispered. Happy birthday, kiddo. He tapped her shoulder, then walked away before she could see the way he swallowed hard. Gifts were opened with the usual excitement. Dolls, art kits, new sneakers, laughter, applause, wrapping paper flying everywhere. But one box remained tucked in the corner, unopened. Andre's. It wasn't large or flashy. Just a small square box wrapped in silver paper with a navy blue ribbon. No one mentioned it. Claire didn't either. That night, when the guests had gone and the house was quiet again, Lena padded softly down the stairs in her pajamas. She carried the box to her room and sat on the bed, her heart thumping louder than it had all day. Inside was a charm bracelet. Simple, delicate. Hanging from one of the silver loops was a tiny firefighter's helmet, polished and perfectly detailed. There was a note, too. In Andre's careful handwriting, "For the bravest girl I know, from the luckiest man who gets to watch her grow up." She stared at it for a long time, fingers tracing the metal charm. Then she slipped it on her wrist and held it close. No one saw her smile, but it was there, small, real. The next morning at school, Lena wore the bracelet under her sleeve. She didn't show anyone, but every time she felt the cool metal brush her skin, her fingers curled around it like a secret, and when her teacher asked her who that was in the fire truck keychain attached to her backpack, she answered softly, "That's someone important." The classroom buzzed with activity. Crayons rolled across desks, glue sticks popped open, and sheets of construction paper fluttered like autumn leaves. Lena sat quietly at the back, her hands folded over a blank page. "All right, class," said Mrs. Dawson, clapping to gather attention. "Your next assignment is something special. We're going to make family trees." There were cheers from some, groans from others. Lena's stomach tightened. "You can include photos, drawings, names, whoever you call family," Mrs. Dawson continued. "And remember, not all trees look the same." As the instructions were passed around, Lena's pencil hovered over the first branch labeled Father. Her fingers trembled. She stared at the space beside it, as if willing something to appear. A face she didn't know, a name she'd never been told. Mrs. Dawson approached, kneeling gently by her desk. "You don't have to include that part, Lena," she said softly. "Only if you're comfortable." Lena nodded, lips pressed into a line. She took the paper home, folded carefully in her backpack, like a secret she didn't want the world to see. That night, she sat at the dining table, the tree still blank. Claire was on the phone in the other room, pacing as she talked to her sister. Andre entered the kitchen, wiping grease off his hands from fixing a leaky faucet. He paused when he saw the page. "School project?" he asked, pulling up a chair beside her. Lena nodded, hesitant. She pushed the paper toward him, then looked away. "I don't know what to write," she whispered. Andre picked it up. His eyes scanned the empty branches, lingering on the line labeled Father. He said nothing at first, just sat there letting the silence hold space. Then he spoke, voice low and steady. "You know, family isn't always about who shares your blood. It's about who shows up, who stays. You get to choose who belongs in your tree." Lena looked up at him, her eyes searching. "Even if other people don't understand it?" she asked. He smiled, one of those quiet, warm smiles that made her feel like the sun was still shining, even on cloudy days. Especially then. Lena didn't say another word. She simply took the paper, grabbed her pencil, and walked to her room, with purpose. For the next hour she drew, names, arrows, roots curling at the base. She carefully wrote Andre in bold, neat letters. Beneath it, she glued a printed photo of them from last month's fall festival, her on his shoulders, both of them laughing under orange leaves. At the top of the paper, she added a title. Not my family tree, not class assignment, just 5 simple. Bruch, my dad is the one who stayed. The next morning, Claire found it lying beside Lena's backpack. She picked it up, eyes scanning the page. Her breath caught when she saw the photo. Andre's arm wrapped proudly around Lena, and the title scrawled in glittery blue ink. Her fingers trembled. Claire wasn't a woman who cried easily, but something about those words, so simple and certain, cut through her. She had spent months trying to balance her daughter's uncertainty with her own fears. She told herself that Lena needed space, that maybe Andre didn't belong in that place yet, that maybe Lena wasn't ready. But Lena was ready, and it hadn't been because of anything said. It had been because of the quiet things. The late night, lullabies hummed from the hallway. The way Andre always showed up at recitals, even when Claire forgot to remind him. The gentle way he adjusted Lena's bike seat, or taught her how to tie her sneakers tighter. The things fathers do, not for recognition, but because love lives in the everyday. Claire set the paper down gently, a mixture of awe and humility washing over her. Lena, backpack slung over her shoulder, appeared in the doorway. "You saw it?" she asked, voice small. Claire nodded. "Yeah, I did." Lena looked down. "Is it okay?" Claire crossed the room, knelt down, and hugged her daughter tightly. "It's more than okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's perfect." The Sunday morning sun cast a warm glow over the backyard, where Andre knelt near the garden, hands buried in the soil. Claire's mother, Eleanor, stood on the porch, arms crossed, lips pursed. She had been watching him for a while. Watching the way he gently coaxed new blossoms into bloom, the way Lena's old bike now leaned polished against the fence. When he finally stood, brushing the dirt from his palms, she stepped forward. "We need to talk," she said crisply. Andre wiped his hands on a towel and gave a polite nod. "Of course." Eleanor glanced around, then stepped closer, lowering her voice to a tight whisper. "I know you mean well, but you're not her father. You're not blood, and you need to be careful not to make her believe otherwise." Andre blinked. His chest rose, then fell. "I've never tried to take anything that wasn't freely given," he said quietly. "And I've never forced her to call me anything." Eleanor's voice sharpened. "She's a child. She doesn't know what's real and what's not. She's already different enough. Don't confuse her." What neither of them realized was that Lena stood behind the screen door, barefoot, hugging her favorite book, heart pounding in her chest. She didn't make a sound. She just listened. And when the voices fell silent, she turned and quietly climbed the stairs, the book pressed tightly to her chest like a secret she wasn't ready to tell. 2 days later, the school auditorium buzzed with chatter. Parents filled the rows for the annual parent showcase, an event where students presented small projects or performances to celebrate family and gratitude. Claire sat in the third row, sandwiched between Eleanor and Andre. Eleanor wore a stiff smile, hands folded perfectly over her purse. Andre sat a bit further back in his seat, not out of discomfort, but restraint. He wasn't sure what the day would bring. When Lena's class was called to the stage, she walked up slowly, her new charm bracelet catching the stage lights. There was a soft murmur of applause. She stood in the center, small and slender, wearing a blue dress with white buttons and her curls tucked behind her ears. "Hi," she said into the microphone. "My name is Lena. I was supposed to do a poem, but I wrote something instead." Claire sat up straighter. Lena unfolded a piece of lined paper. Her voice was quiet at first, but it grew word by word. "I used to think family meant people who shared your face, your hair, your eyes. That's what everyone says, right? That it's about where you come from, but sometimes it's about who shows up. He didn't give me my eyes, but he taught me to see. He didn't teach me how to walk. But when I fell, he was the one who picked me up. He makes pancakes on Saturdays, he sings funny songs, he fixed my bike. He's not my dad by blood, but he's my dad in every way that matters. And I love him." Silence fell like a blanket. For a moment no one moved, not even the teachers. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Eleanor's face paled. "And Andre?" He sat frozen, eyes wide, lips parted in stunned stillness, like someone had knocked the air out of his lungs. Lena looked out into the crowd, her eyes scanning until they landed on him. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she smiled. After the showcase, the hallway hummed with hushed voices and stifled tears. Claire hugged Lena so tightly it was hard to breathe. Andre didn't speak much. He just kept looking at her like he was trying to memorize the moment. Later that day, as the family walked out of the school, the principal, Mrs. Holloway, called. Out from her office door, "Mr. Jones?" Andre turned, surprised. She stepped toward him, holding a small manila folder. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice low. "Last week, Lena asked me if she could change her emergency contact. I told her she needed a parent's permission, but she said, 'Andre's the one I want called. He's the one who always comes.'" Andre's throat tightened. She said she hoped one day it'd be official. And honestly, we all kind of hoped that too. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. As the door clicked closed behind the principal, Andre stood in the middle of the hallway, sunlight spilling in through the tall windows, painting long shadows across the tile. Lena ran up beside him, slipping her hand into his, and for the first time, without hesitation, she said, "Come on, Dad, let's go home." The days that followed Lena's speech at the parent showcase moved with quiet significance. Something had shifted, not just in Lena's heart, but in Claire's too. She sat by the kitchen table late one night, staring at a stack of school drawings and old photos, Lena's tiny hand clutching Andre's, muddy shoes after their first hike, pancakes shaped like stars. In the stillness of that moment, Claire reached for her phone and whispered, "I want to make this right." By the end of the week, the adoption paperwork was filed. The court date arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Andre wore his best shirt, the sleeves ironed twice. Claire held his hand in the hallway, the same hand she had clutched when Lena was first born. And she wasn't sure how she would raise a child alone. Lena walked between them, her blue dress buttoned to the collar, the silver charm bracelet peeking from her sleeve, swinging with each step. Inside the small courtroom, the walls felt taller than usual. A female judge with soft gray eyes reviewed the file, then looked at Lena gently. "Miss Lena," she said, "I see here you requested this hearing. May I ask why this is so important to you?" Lena sat up straighter in the witness chair, legs swinging slightly off the floor. She looked at the judge, then turned to glance at Andre. "I don't want to spend another day explaining why the man I love isn't my dad," she said clearly. "Because he is. He always has been." Silence. "Fine." Judge's eyes didn't blink for a moment. Then she nodded, a slow smile rising. "Well then," she said, "let's make it official." The gavel struck, a soft ceremonial sound. But to Lena, it echoed like thunder, like the world finally catching up to what she already knew. That night, the house was warm with leftover laughter and the scent of baked cookies. Claire watched from the hallway as Andre knelt by Lena's bed, pulling the blanket over her shoulders. She was already drifting off, her small hand wrapped tightly around his. Her charm bracelet, silver, simple, cherished, caught the lamplight and shimmered softly against the sheets. Andre sat there a while, even after her breathing slowed. Because no matter what anyone had said, he was her father now, in every way that mattered and always would be.